My name is Emma Lockley, and I'm the Communications Manager with the Fulbright Commission in Ireland. So as many of you know, our application period for 2019-2020 is now open. Just to give you a little bit of background about the Fulbright Commission, the Global Fulbright Program was established in 1946 by U.S. Senator J. William Fulbright, and the idea behind it was to increase mutual respect and understanding between the people of the U.S. and people of other countries by means of educational and cultural exchange. And we always start our presentations with this little bit of history about the program because it's still as important today as it was in 1946, because the ethos behind the program is still the same, and this is something that you need to consider for your application, the idea of education and cultural exchange and how you plan to contribute to that. So the program, the Fulbright program, then came to Ireland in 1957 and was written into Irish legislation in 1991. The program is funded by the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as the US Department of State and a number of other stakeholders. It's currently in 180 countries globally, so there's Fulbright commissions or posts in over 180 countries. Each year, about roughly 8,000 awards are presented globally, and to date that's over 370,000 awards globally. So what are the Fulbright Awards? They're grants to research, study or lecture, or teach or lecture in the US. So therefore, Irish or EU citizens to go to the US to conduct research, study, teach or lecture, and for US citizens to do the same here in Ireland. The grants, the awards provide a monetary grant, visa administration, accident and emergency insurance, cultural and professional programming, ongoing support, links to an international network of Fulbright alumni. So when you're over in the US, if you're successful in your application, we will provide support from Ireland, and you'll also have the US Fulbright program there to support you, as well as a wide network of Fulbright alumni. In terms of who's eligible, you need to be an Irish citizen or an EU citizen who's been living in the Republic of Ireland for the last 3 or more consecutive years. You cannot be a dual US-Irish citizen, a green card holder, or currently living in the US. And you must not have already spent extensive amounts of time in the US studying or living. So if you have done a J1 or something like that, which many Irish students and professionals have done, don't worry about that. And this is more like if you've spent, a large amount of time, like 4 out of the last 5 years, in the US. So what are we looking for? In our candidates, we're looking for leadership qualities, so the potential for leadership or any demonstrations of leadership to date, an understanding of the Fulbright program and ethos, so that mutual sharing of cultural education exchange that I mentioned earlier, and we'll touch a little bit more on that later. An understanding of the role and benefit of being a Fulbrighter. So think about, what this scholarship could do for your work, your research or your study, for your career, but also the greater impact. So what impact this work will have on your discipline, your field, and the world in general as well. So that's the kind of scope we're looking at. So we're looking for innovative projects with long-term impacts, and you need to have rationale for going to the US. So have a think about why exactly you want to go and do this body of research or study or lecturing in the US. Why couldn't you do it here in Ireland or anywhere else in Europe? Really think about that and think about where you're planning to go and why it's a good match for you, whether that's the state the institution you plan to go to, the contacts that you plan to meet over there. All of that can be included in this rationale. And you must have a serious interest in cultural exchange, so this also fits into the Fulbright ethos. So really consider, when you're going over or when you're choosing where to go to, what aspects of the culture in that state or that town do you want to embrace and learn about, whether that's, from sports to music to politics to anything like that. Just have a think about it, because it is something that you'll be asked about, certainly if you make it to the interview stage. So in terms of the application process, the application period is now open for Irish Awards. It closes on the 6th of November 2018. Then from November to December, we will be shortlisting candidates for interview, which will take place in January, February 2019. And then in March or April, you receive word of whether you have an offer for a scholarship. Then just a little bit extra on that, if you are successful in your application, you'll be invited to an award ceremony in June, which usually takes place in either the US Ambassador's residence here in Dublin, in the Phoenix Park, or else in Ivy House, the Department of Foreign Affairs building in Ivy House in Stephen's Green. So if you're interested in applying for this year, the very first step is to visit our website. I know many of you will have already explored the website, but please do review the information there carefully, because there's quite a lot there. We have a number of tabs in each of the award categories, including FAQs and things like that. So make sure you've reviewed all of them. So if you're approaching the website for the first time, you click on the Going to the USA section. Then you will be brought into either this page where you can see that there's a number of different categories. So you need to choose your award category. So those award categories, there's 4 of them. For the Irish Awards. These are the Irish Student Awards, and they're for postgraduate research or degree programs in the US. The Irish Scholar Awards then are for academic or professional research and or lecturing in the US. The Tech Impact Awards are also Scholar Awards. They're for academic and professional research in cross-disciplinary ICT in the US. So the application of technology across any discipline. These are shorter term awards than the Student or Scholar Awards. And then the Irish FLTA Awards. And these are to teach the Irish language in the US. So within these categories, we have a number of sponsored awards. So for each of these 4 categories, there are all discipline awards, especially, I suppose, when we apply them to the Student or the Scholar Awards. You could apply to the all discipline categories. This means that whatever your background is, your research, your field of study, you can apply to the main general pool of Student or Scholar Awards. But in addition to these, we have sponsored Irish Awards in a number of categories. So for students and scholars, in addition to the All Discipline Awards, we have the Fulbright Enterprise Ireland Award in Innovation, the Fulbright EPA Award in Water, Climate Change and Sustainable Environment, the Marine Institute Award in Marine Science or Business, the Fulbright GSI Award in Geoscience, the Fulbright, for the student-only awards, okay, you have the Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, the Fulbright LLM Awards in Law, the Fulbright Chagas Awards in Agriculture, Forestry or Food, and the Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships. Then for scholars only, the Fulbright HRB Health Impact Award for health professionals, the Fulbright NUI Scholar Award for NUI graduates, and the Fulbright Tech Impact Award for short-term research. So step 3 is to register your interest, okay? So once you've reviewed that information on the website, you go into, in this case, the Irish Student Awards page, and you scroll through the tabs, so the what are they, grant information, how to apply, and deadline sections. And in the how to apply section, you'll see the register your interest here in bold. And this will lead you through to our registration form, which requires the following information. So you need to give us your full name, your email, the program you're applying for, so whether it's the Irish Awards for this year, your award category, then whether you are applying to a student award or a scholar award or tech impact or FLTA. The sponsored award if relevant, so if any of those sponsored awards I've just gone through, if any of them are relevant to you, you'll need to select that too and let us know in your registration form. And also let us know your home institution or organization and where you intend to study your research. So if you are not affiliated with an institution at home in Ireland at the moment, that's okay also. There's an option to say non-applicable or no institution. And similarly, if you haven't decided yet or would rather not say at this point where you intend to study your research, you can choose that too in the registration form. You'll also need to tell us your area of study or research. I think the category is discipline on the registration form. When you've filled out that registration form, our awards managers will issue you a link to the online application system, which is called Embark. This is a global application system. So it's really important that you also receive the application guidelines. Our awards managers will send them to you. But it's very, very important that you read through them carefully because Embark, the application system, is a global system. So there are questions in there that will not apply to you as an Irish applicant. So that's where our guidelines come in and make everything very simple for you. In terms of what you'll need for your application, what to start preparing from now if you haven't already, you'll need personal information, including your CV. So there are a number of questions on personal information, and then you will need to upload your CV as well. You'll need to write a personal statement or a Fulbright statement, depending on whether you're applying to the Student or Scholar Award. Now this is different to your project statement, which will be about your study or research. Then you'll also need 3 references. I have this in bold because due to recent changes in that Embark application system, there is an option to put between 2 and 5 references in there. But you need to put in 3 references as an Irish applicant, and that is clear in your guidelines, but it's just something to be aware of because we did have queries about that last year from people who had missed it in their guidelines. For student applicants, you may need transcripts. So it's always a good idea to request those as early as possible because if you're requesting them from a past institution, they may take a couple of weeks, if not a month, to process them. So it's good to put the request out for them as soon as possible. For artists, you'll need 4 copies, hard copies of your work portfolio. And then for all applicants, apart from FLTAs, you'll need a letter of affiliation. So this is for researchers or scholars. Now, you do not need your letter of affiliation by time of application. So the deadline is 6th of November for your Fulbright application. You don't need to have your letter of affiliation by this stage, although we would recommend reaching out to host institutions that you're interested in going to and working with, and seeking this letter of affiliation as soon as possible, but it's not essential to have it by 6th of November. You will need it by time of offer, so you'll need it, ideally by the time of interview. But if you can't get it until the time of your offer, which would be more like March. That's okay. But we would recommend reaching out to the institutions as soon as possible, because it will help you to focus your application and also to show us that that institution is really eager to have you come over and work with them. For students, if you're applying to a master's or a PhD program, you need to apply through the normal channels for that. If you're applying for the full PhD program or a master's program, you'll need to make your application to that university as normal. That's separate to your Fulbright application, okay? And then you'll also need to upload a copy of your passport, your photo page and your passport. So there's some things to remember. As I said, read our website info really carefully. There's FAQs on there, questions that were asked time and again every year. So it's always a good idea to look through them. And then, of course, read through those guidelines really thoroughly. So as I said, there's a number of questions, things like, you know, asking you for your information about TEFL. But as Irish applicants, the presumption is that we have a fluent English, so you won't need to answer that question, and that'll be clear in your guidelines. But if you approach the application without your Irish guidelines, you can just spend a lot of time, you know, unnecessarily going through questions that don't apply to you. Check if a sponsored award might be suitable for you. We would really encourage people, if, you know, the EPA award or the GSI award is a good fit for you, to express that when you make contact with us. In terms of your application, it's just one small extra sheet that you fill out to say why you think you might be suitable for that sponsored award. But those places, you know, are funded every year. These agencies are eager to have students and scholars go affiliated with them and Fulbright, so it's well worth investigating those specific sponsored awards. Also important to check if there is additional criteria for those sponsored awards. Some of them may require you to reach out to a host institution or add extra information into your application. So just check that, and that's all available on our website. On the student and scholar awards pages, you'll be able to look at flyers from those sponsored awards, and they have all of the criteria and information on there. As I mentioned, students applying to master's and PhD programs have to apply separately to Fulbright applications. Researchers and lecturers must seek affiliation with the host institution. So again, that's a matter of reaching out to potential host institutions as early as possible to see if they can host you, to see if they have facilities available and resources. You know, if you need a lab space, if you need a study space, if you need access to their libraries, etc., you should really explore that with them at as early a stage as possible to see if it's a right fit for you. For FLTAs, these are the Irish language teaching category. You'll be matched with a suitable institution. So you don't, if you're applying for the FLTA award category to teach the Irish language in the US, you don't need to seek affiliation with the host institution, because we have a number of partner institutions that we match FLTA Irish language teacher candidates with each year. So to reiterate, again, print out the guidelines at your earliest convenience as soon as you receive them from your awards managers, and use them as a step-by-step guide. So literally we would recommend that you print them out, you have them beside you at all times when you're filling in your application, because even in terms of tips for your essays, you know, it'll really outline what you need to include and length of essays and things like that. And then in terms of other tips and advice for application, may seem obvious, but don't wait until the last minute. Give your referees, specifically, give them sufficient time. They need to submit your references to Embark by the 6th of November deadline. So it's really important that you reach out to them as soon as possible to let them know about that deadline, and then it's your responsibility to follow up with them. How it works on the application is that you will input their details and they will receive notification from Embark, from the online application system, but they'll need to have advance warning, obviously from you, that you want them to give you a reference. And sometimes that email from Embark could go into their spam folder, so you really need to follow up with them and make sure they've received the notification from Embark and that they can access it to fill it in and complete it, and maybe just give them a quick reminder before the 6th of November deadline that it's due in shortly. And there's guidelines in there as well for you and for them. In terms of the personal statement I mentioned earlier, this is different to your project statement. It's about you. Like many of the US, I'm not sure if is that sound affecting people? Hopefully not. So for the personal statement, it's not to rehash your CV. So this is about your personality and why you're going to be a good fit for Fulbright, for the ethos of Fulbright, but also for the exchange. So how you're going to be an ambassador for Ireland and for the EU when you go to the US, and then how you're going to bring that knowledge back to Ireland once you're finished your scholarship. So it's really about highlighting your successes and challenges to date, whether these be academic or non-academic and personal, and thinking about what your unique selling point is. So in terms of that, I mean, you know, that sounds like a marketing term, but it's really about where your passion lies, why you're passionate about what you do, and how you want to communicate that to the rest of the world and what impact you want to make. So the personal statement, just try not to double up on your project statement, essentially. So the project statement in itself is about what you intend to study or research, why you've chosen the US, that rationale, then the impact of your award specifically, what impact that will have on your career and on greater society, and why getting a Fulbright Award matters to you and indeed to your field. Again, it might seem obvious, but always spell check. So if you have somebody that might check through your application for you, that's always a good idea, because you know yourself, when we've been working on something for several weeks, we can miss things ourselves. So a second eye is always a good idea. And then, again, make sure you're following our Irish guidelines, because sometimes people do go ahead and plow on with the application without printing out those Irish deadlines that are so important. We do also have a number of LLM awards. Now these stand out because we have tuition waivers for these. These are specifically for students. For postgraduate students, you can apply if you're in final year of your undergrad to go as a postgraduate student and do an LLM. They also welcome professionals, postgraduate students as well. So this year, Mara School of Law as well as Notre Dame are offering full tuition waivers, as well as you would be receiving the Fulbright stipend, the grant as well as that, whereas Penn are offering a partial tuition waiver. So that's quite significant in terms of students and professionals who are hoping to go over and do an LLM, the tuition waivers as well as the Fulbright stipend. So we have another webinar tomorrow on the Law Awards specifically, and we'll be joined by representatives from Maurer and Penn tomorrow. So there's still time to register for that one on our website as well. You can register up until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I also wanted to give a special mention to the Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships. These fellowships are open to students only as well, so for people who are just finishing their undergrad, who have completed a master's, who are currently undertaking a PhD in Ireland or Europe. So these ones, there's 3 awards available for 3 years. You would only be going for a short period of time, for between 3 and 6 months, but there were candidates will be going this year, next year, and the year after. And the host institutions here, the partnerships, are the Harry Ransom Centre, the Exploratorium, and the Smithsonian Institute. So the reason I highlight these is because these 3 awards have specific eligibility criteria that includes seeking a letter of affiliation from the institution, whether it's the Harry Ransom Centre, Exploratorium, or the Smithsonian. And they have, a number of them at least, have specific deadlines for you to request this letter of affiliation, and that will be ahead of our 6th of November Fulbright deadline. So it's important to double check that. Just to touch again on the Fulbright ethos, as I mentioned earlier, this is really important. Your work and your project and what you intend to do in the US and afterwards is really important. But unless you understand the Fulbright ethos, it's going to be, an issue for your application. So it's really worth spending a little bit of time before you submit your application, just doing a little bit of background research into the Fulbright program and what it means to be a Fulbrighter. So you can discuss these both in your application, in your personal statement, your personal essay, and then also in your interview if you are shortlisted. So it's your understanding of the program, how you'll benefit from the award, what benefits you'll bring to the program, and how you envision your ongoing interaction. So if you think about it, there's such a large network of Fulbrighters, not only in Ireland and the US, but globally. So you're going to be introduced to that network and be part of it for your entire career if you want to be. So it's worth thinking about how you'll fit into that and how that can be beneficial to yourself and to the network. A good way to understand the Fulbright ethos is to have a look at the alumni section of our website. There are a number of kind of testimonials there, and we also have a number of videos on our YouTube channel that are very helpful in getting a good idea of what the Fulbright ethos is. We also have a number of Fulbright ambassadors around the country. They're Fulbright alumni ambassadors, so all of them have been through the program, and they are available on campus I think we now have up to 22 Fulbright ambassadors on campus around Ireland, around higher education institution around Ireland. So it's worth investigating that as well. They're more than happy to chat to you, to talk about their experience and their approaches to the application. So it's worth reaching out to them, and again, their contact details are available on our website. We have a video, a newish video. We made this last year, and it has some testimonies from our Fulbright alumni, and it's quite inspirational, I think. So it's worth having a look on our Fulbright YouTube channel at that as well. So the deadline is 4 p.m. Tuesday, the 6th of November, 2018, okay? So that's for your online application, but also, as well as submitting your online application through Embark, through the link we provide you with, you need to print it out and post 2 copies to our offices, postmarked no later than the deadline of 4 p.m. on Tuesday, 6th of November, okay? So it's a really, really good idea to aim a few days ahead of the deadline so you can give yourself time to get those copies out to us, because later incomplete applications won't be accepted. So the things, I suppose, to remember for that deadline are to make sure, you followed up with your referees, that they've got their reference submitted online directly to us, and that you have all your bits like your transcripts, your everything like that ready to go to be uploaded to the Embark system, so you can then print the copies out for us in time. So the key website to visit, Fulbright.ie. You can ring us directly in the Fulbright offices in Dublin if you do have any questions. I would recommend that if you haven't already joined us on social media, our various social media channels, it's always a good idea to do that. Fulbright_Air is our Twitter, account, and we do have kind of regular updates there and tips as we get closer to the deadline. Similarly on Facebook and Instagram as well. Awards at Fulbright.ie is going to be your key email correspondence address during this application process. So as soon as you filled in your registration form for your interest in the awards, you're going to be in touch with our awards managers at that address. So that is the end of the webinar, and that's just a very brief run through of the Fulbright Awards and the kind of key things to bear in mind when you're applying for this year, for the 2019-2020 cycle. If you like now, we have a bit of time for questions. There's quite a few participants, so I won't open it up to the audio, but if you would like to type in the chat box any questions you do have, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I'm sure many of you have already had a chance to look at the website and go through a number of the details. So, sorry, Rory here is asking 3 or more references. Only 3? You need 3 references. So what I was trying to say earlier was that on the global application form that you'll be receiving, there is an option to submit 2 to 5 references. But on our Irish guidelines that you'll receive, it's very clear that you need 3 references. Okay, so you only need 3. You can put more in if you want, but it's unnecessary. But you can't put less than 3. So just keep 3 in your mind. Somebody else has asked, can your visit take place during the summer months if research-based? Generally, we would try to keep the awards between the academic year. You need to be in Ireland for our award ceremony and orientation in June. So the very earliest you could go out really is July, August, but that would only be in exceptional circumstances. Usually, mid-August to September, ideally, would be the earliest you would go. Then you can go any time up until the next year. So, you might be applying to go the summer of the following year, if you get me. So you're applying for a 2019-2020 award. So you might plan to go summer of 2020. But again, it's worth bearing in mind that if you're going to an institution, maybe classes will be out and there won't be as many people on campus during the summer months. So it's worth thinking about, for your kind of immersion experience, if you go during the summer, you might miss out. But in exceptional circumstances, we can look at that. So get in touch with our awards managers and they'll have a look at your particular case. Somebody else has asked, can we download a copy of this presentation missed at the beginning? Absolutely. I'm recording this presentation, so what I'll do is I'll email the recording out to all of you within the next few days, and it'll also be available on our YouTube channel. Somebody else has asked, for academic Fulbright application, can you apply for 5 to 6 months rather than the full year, or what is recommended? Absolutely, yeah. You can apply for, depending on whether you're going as a student or scholar, it's the minimum is 3 or 4 months, and then the maximum is 12 months. So you can go for 5 to 6 months if that's how long, if you're undertaking research, for example, and that's how long you think it will take. That's perfect. You just have to give kind of a little breakdown in your research proposal about why you think it will take that long, the rationale behind it. But that's more than welcome, yeah, 5 to 6 month proposals. Can you have a 2-site visit, and if yes, can you come home in between, for example, at Christmas? We don't usually recommend this. Ideally, you would go for 1 full stint. This makes things much more straightforward in terms of your visa, as well as a number of other things. If there's a specific reason you want to go for 2 stints, you can talk with our awards managers again. But do bear in mind that, if you're going on an award and you want to come home for the Christmas holidays, that's quite normal. People will do that. They will go over and they'll come back and visit for Christmas. That's not a problem. There's just obviously lots of rules around your visa that our awards managers will make you aware of, and you just have to make sure you're abiding by those. Thank you. With regard to criteria for the student award, are you counted as a student when you have completed your PhD Viva Voce but not graduated yet? Yes, so this is a little bit of a tricky area in that if you're applying for a student award, you cannot have done your Viva, okay? So you cannot have submitted your PhD. If you want to apply for a student award while you're doing a PhD, it needs to be part of your PhD. So if that's not applicable to you, if you're going to be finished your PhD research and everything by that stage, then you could consider going as a scholar awardee, okay? So say you have your Viva at Christmas and you've submitted your PhD and you're applying to go anytime from September 2019. If you've been conferred by that time, that's fine. If you won't be conferred even till later in the year, you can go after that as a scholar. So it's a little bit tricky that if you fall between those times, but you can chat away to our awards managers, and in most cases there's an option. In some cases, if there's a very long gap between your Viva or your submission and your conferral, you may need to wait till the next year to apply, but that's in kind of rare cases. Somebody else was asked, if you apply for a sponsored award and don't get it, are you then put into the general award pool? Exactly, yes, and thank you for bringing that up. I probably should have mentioned that. If you apply for an EPA sponsored award or a Marine Institute sponsored award and the sponsor says, oh, that isn't a great match for us this year, you would be considered in the general all disciplines award. So you can't kind of lose out by doing that, by expressing interest in a sponsored award. So we would recommend doing that. Another question, would I have more of a chance if I applied to do both research and lecturing? It really depends. It really depends on what your objectives are for your Fulbright Award. And especially as well, I suppose, where you're going and the host institution. So that's one of the reasons, I suppose, reaching out to your preferred host institution as soon as possible is a good idea, because if you say, okay, I want to do research into this area and I'm also interested in doing some lecturing, they'll let you know whether that's something that they would encourage or whether that's possible, or whether, they think, well, your research might actually just take up the whole of that time. So it's just something to explore with the contact in your host institution, and also to think about yourself, that you're giving yourself enough time to complete your research objectives if you're going to do some lecturing as well. Somebody has asked, is it possible to apply to multiple programs, e.g. General Awards and Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships? We would try and get you to focus on applying for just one. So as I said there, that might have answered your question a little bit actually. If you apply for Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, I suppose that's more specific. The fellowships are specific to go to, say, the Smithsonian to do a certain body of research. But having said that, if you applied for that and your proposal, was pipped to the post by another person in the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, you could be considered for a General Discipline Award as well. So we would ask you to focus on applying for one award, but then to know that if you're not suitable for that award for any reason, for the sponsored award, you'll be put back into the all discipline pool, okay? Again, if you have more specific questions on that, maybe give our awards manager or myself a call and we can talk you through it. Another question, are you eligible to apply if you spent an academic year abroad in the US? Yeah, that's fine. 1 year is fine. You just can't be there at time of application or just before you leave for your Fulbright Award. So if you did an academic year last year or several years ago or 20 years ago, that's absolutely fine. Another question, for a scholar, can you hold a teaching role in Ireland if it is blended online teaching? Can you hold a teaching role in Ireland? I'm not quite sure what that one means exactly. If you're going from Ireland as a teacher, if you can go to be a scholar once you have a PhD, or you have 5 years professional experience. So that might answer your question, but if it doesn't, just contact me after and we can have a chat about it. Another person asking, can you apply for less than 4 months for the student visa? No, for the student award, the minimum, is 4 months. Hi, thanks for precision. What is the exact difference between student and scholar award? Okay, that's the first question. So the student award is for postgraduate students who have not had a PhD who are, have not done a PhD. So if you're in your final year of undergrad, or if you're doing a master's, or you just finished a master's, or you want to go and do a PhD, a full PhD or part of PhD in the US, you're going to be applying as a student. Applying for a scholar would mean that you have a PhD already conferred, or you have 5 years relevant professional experience. So the relevant professional experience is important because it means, if you want to go off and do research, that professional experience has to be, related to what you want to go and do. Second question there, can there be more than one letter of affiliation if you applied, for example, to 2 or 3 universities to do a master's? Yes, so just to be clear there, if you're applying to do a master's, you need to apply through the normal channels, which would be you need to fill out the master's application through your preferred institutions in the US. So it's a bit different to having a letter of affiliation, whereas people going to do research would need a letter of affiliation, or going to do lecturing would need a letter of affiliation. But for a master's, you'll just be applying through normal channels through that institution in the US. And if you want to apply for more than one, that's absolutely possible. You can apply for 2 or 3 universities, and then in your Fulbright application you can put your preference university and then second or third option. You can apply to more than 3, but we'd kind of generally recommend keeping it to 3 if possible, so it's not too much work for you, and also so you keep your application focused. So the more kind of focused your Fulbright application is, the better. That's absolutely okay if it's a master's in 3 different places in the US, but once the subjects are similar, to show that you have focus in your studies. And then another question, do the transcripts have to be official, or can they be a copy? They need to be official. Yeah, so if you need to really look into ordering them now from your institution, and if you do have any issues with that you know of already, contact our awards managers and just talk it through with them so they can help you out with it. Another question, if specifically applying for a Marine Institute award, can you recommend particular Fulbright ambassador or anyone in the institution who would have some experience? Yes, so a good thing to do if you want to talk to some of our alumni, which I would recommend, is go on our website, and we have an alumni section, and then there's profiles for alumni from at least the last 6-7 years. And you can actually do a filter on our website that will say Marine Institute Award. So it'll bring up everyone who's been on a Marine Institute Award for the last 7 years at least. And then we can't have their email addresses on our website, but as soon as you've identified 1 or 2 or 10 alumni that you want to get in touch with, just email myself or the awards managers, and we'll request that with them to kind of reach out to you, or can we pass on their email address to you, and they're usually more than happy to chat by phone or meet you for a coffee if they're in the area. So another question, what are the criteria for the NUI Scholar Award other than being an NUI graduate? Just double check the flyer on our website here. I think you have to be an NUI graduate but also doing an NUI postgraduate award. But just double check that. I know there are kind of 2 elements to the criteria for NUI graduates, so just have a look at the small print on that flyer on our website. Could you provide more detail on the eligibility criteria in terms of extensive time spent in the US? If you have done a year visit more than 10 years ago, does this make you ineligible? No, I think I answered that question just a little bit with the question a little bit earlier. 1 year is not going to make a difference. It's literally only if you've spent say 4 out of the last 5 years in the US, that would be deemed as extensive US experience, okay? If you've only spent a year or two in the US, you know, when it comes down to the very last deciding factors, if you're up against somebody who has no experience in the US but is kind of on the same scoring as you, there may be preference given to that person who has no experience to give them a chance in the US. But I wouldn't let that put you off applying at all, because that's a very kind of rare situation. Now another question about the that PhD, applying as a PhD student when you've had your visa but before conferring. No, so if you've had your visa but you haven't been conferred yet, you cannot apply for a student award, because if you're applying for a student award to do PhD research in the US, that research has to be part of your PhD, you know. So if you've already finished your PhD, you can't do a PhD student award. So you'd have to apply as a scholar. But usually, you know, even if you're not a scholar, even if you haven't got your PhD conferred by the time of application deadline, that shouldn't stop you from applying as a scholar, because it's going to be a whole, you know, 8 to 10 months before you actually go on your award. So once you have your PhD conferred by the time you're going on your award, by your award start date, you should be able to apply as a scholar. Okay? Another question, can you receive less funding than you put forward in your proposal? E.g., if you're planning to receive other scholarships to fund your study in the US and have... okay, so I think the question is here, if you apply for funding and you get additional funding, will any of your original Fulbright funding be detracted? No, the answer is no. When you apply for a Fulbright award and you break down what you want to do and where you want to go, essentially the Fulbright award is based on a stipend, a cost of living stipend. So depending on where you're going and how long you're going for, that's how the Fulbright panel will decide how much award of an award amount you receive. So if you, in the meantime, manage to get extra funding, whether that's from your host institution or from an institution here in Ireland or an agency, that can be added on, that's absolutely fine. There's only been 1 or 2 situations that I'm aware of where the funding has clashed in that, and it wasn't, I don't think, from the Fulbright side as far as I'm aware, but a candidate had also been funded to go to the US through another stream, another funding source, and they weren't happy, you know, to have 2 sources of funding for the exact same proposal. So just check it out with the other funding body as well to make sure they're happy with it. But as I say, you know, I've only heard 1 case of that, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Another question: I'm working in a university at the moment on part-time contracts. They finish in June 2019, and I'm applying for NUI award. I would assume that I would not have a home institution. Yeah, I mean, with the home institution, you don't have to cite a home institution if, you know, you think you're going to be somewhere else, or you don't necessarily affiliate with that one institution at the moment. You can just leave it as is for now, as in, like, does not apply for now. And then when it comes closer to the time, and we can see what the situation is, and we can either, you know, assign an home institution depending on where you are then when you're leaving for your award, or else you could be at large. Another question, I was wondering, are postgrad students eligible to apply for lecturing roles in the USA via the Irish student application? So you can apply to go over to do a Fulbright award, and through that you could be doing some lecturing. But in terms of if you mean a longer term lecturing role, no, because as part of the Fulbright visa, you will be expected to come back to Ireland after your Fulbright award, and that's part of the kind of cultural exchange, that you're bringing the information you've learned back to Ireland, and it's a condition of your visa. So if you're going over to do 6 months research in the US, then you have to come back and fulfill a 2-year home rule, basically, which will mean you can travel back and forth between Ireland and the US and whatever other country you want, but you can't get a working permit in the US until you fulfill that 2-year home rule in Ireland. Now, for people who are applying for a master's, which might be more than 1 year, or a PhD, which might be, several years, you can obviously stay on. Your first year will be your Fulbright year, but then you can stay on and complete your PhD or your master's. But after that, this 2-year home rule will still apply, so you'd need to come home to Ireland to fulfill that part of your visa before you can get a, working permit in the US. Another question, if applying for 2019 in success, and if successful, what month would be the earliest you could go? Usually, as I say, it would be September 2019. Somebody did ask about leaving earlier in the summer. We would discourage that generally, but there have been cases where people have left a little bit earlier depending on circumstances, for if they're going to do a specific body of research that would benefit from taking place in July or August, we can look into that. So just chat to our awards managers about your specific situation. Okay, another question. I'm in the final year of the PhD and I'm expected to complete by the end of August 2019. Can I still apply as a student given that I would start the exchange after the end of the PhD? Usually not, no, yeah, so it would have to be, if you're applying as a student, the research you're doing as a student would have to be part of your PhD. Otherwise, you would have to wait until you can apply for a scholar award. So in some cases, if you're not graduating till next year, I know, your conferral might be not until the following year, so it's just something to look into, timelines, and maybe discuss with our awards manager as well. I might have already answered that question a little bit earlier, but no harm in clarifying. Okay, are your referees asked to write about your research project or your personal suitability for the award, or both? Yeah, usually it's your personal suitability from the award. So we would recommend choosing people who, know you quite well or worked quite close with you in a supervisory or colleague capacity. And if they know about your research project, if you're happy to share that with them, and they want to reference that, that's no harm at all, but it's not essential. Okay, another question. The Irish instructions say that only successful candidates need official transcript later in the application process. So we need official ones or copies for the. I know you're asked about transcripts already. Okay, if the guidelines say that you only need your official ones for accepting, then that's fine. That may have just changed slightly since last year. Apologies. So I might just clarify it with my colleagues, but perhaps for the application section or for the application deadline, the copy will apply. I might just check that with my awards managers and just get back to you about that, Oisin. Okay, another question. Has the Fulbright grant for a scholar a cap? Because some US universities are very expensive. Fulbright grant for a scholar. I'm not sure what you mean by that, sorry. If you wouldn't mind just clarifying that. Has the Fulbright grant for a scholar a cap? Because some US universities are very expensive. Okay, would it be okay if a referee were from the host institution which you are applying to? Yeah, if you've already worked with that referee, that shouldn't be a problem. But a reference is different to your letter of invitation, for sure. So, if it's the same person you're going to get to write your letter of invitation, we probably wouldn't recommend that. But if you've worked closely with that person before, or, the main thing about your referees is that they know your work and they're familiar with it, and they can speak to it and your commitment and your passion for your work, essentially. So that's the main thing to bear in mind. Yeah, one more. Is it just current PhD transcripts that are required or past undergrad? No, so it's only for student awards you need to have your transcripts, okay? Another question, if you want to visit non-traditional educational and research centres, e.g. run by minorities or civil rights groups, should you list this as well as your university? If this is to do research, you just need to reach out to them, the same as you would an institution with your request for a letter of affiliation. And I can't imagine, you can't go and do a master's with a non-institution, so I presume that question only applies to doing research. Another question, do you need a transcript even if you're a PhD student? I'll have to check that, Johnny, sorry. I'm not sure whether you could just have your results of your previous, or whether you might need your transcripts. I just have to check that, double check that, and get back to you by email after, if you don't mind. Is there any other questions for now? No? Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you all for joining, and thanks for sticking around for the question times as well. As I say, I will send a recording of the webinar to you, and we'll have it up on our YouTube site as well, so you can review the information. And don't forget to just fill out that registration page as soon as you can, so you receive those guidelines and you can get started as soon as possible. Best of luck to all of you with your application, and as I say, we have one more tomorrow for the LLM, the Law Awards, if any of you are interested in applying for LLM Awards. So do join us for that from 5:30 Irish time tomorrow as well. Thanks everyone for joining, and best of luck in your application. Bye-bye.